Hello, everyone. We're live. So we are live today with Ric Rodriguez, Garrett Mehrguth, and James Brown. And we're going to be talking about four myths, four SEO myths, not four myths as in Greek mythology, actually for SEO. Yeah, we will have a great presentation that Ric has prepared, a panel discussion, and then some questions. So hi, everyone. Hi, Liz. Hi, Felipe. Thank you all for watching. Lauren. Guys, if you have, not guys, people, if you have any questions, just send them out as we speak, and we will try to answer them. A lot of excitement on the chat. So let me introduce our speakers today. We have Ric Rodriguez, who is the head of search at Vashi, which is a London-based agency. We also have James Brown, who is the lead SEO director at Blue Array. And we have Garrett Mehrguth. And I'm sorry, Garrett, if I have pronounced this incorrectly. I asked you yesterday, and probably I'm doing it incorrectly again, who is the CEO at Directed Consulting. So today, and to start this chat, guys, I want to know what's your favorite SEO myth first, and then your favorite conspiracy theory. It started with James.
Oh, cool. So my favorite SEO myth is that Adobe Analytics is better than Google Analytics. I think there are some people out there who just believe that with all of their might, but the truth, it's terrible. I don't know why you'd want to use it or pay for it.
Totally agree with that. Yeah.
And the favorite conspiracy is one I only learned about at Christmas. So on Christmas Day, this was blowing my mind. But there's this long-held belief that Paul McCartney actually died during the 60s and was replaced by a completely different person. And there's loads of evidence in tracks or evidence, interviews, all kinds of conspiracy nut jobs out there that claims this is true. And I'm starting to buy into it.
Good. That's great. What about you, Ric? What is your favorite SEO myth and conspiracy theory?
So my favorite SEO myth is actually just my favorite digital marketing myth, which is that when it comes to things like customer journeys, we always have this like perfect view of this very linear thing, and that everybody, like regardless of who they are, always follows the same path or the number of paths to conversion. When in fact, like people are all over the place. People are looking for information in tons of different places, and actually there is no sort of linearity to it. It's more that we just need to be there where they look for us, although we can predict next actions from in a lot of cases. My favorite conspiracy theory is the Mandela effect. So the idea that there are points of things that people remember as like happening. Nelson Mandela dying in prison. There's a US brand of something that the people remember, like the spelling's wrong. And the theory is that actually we've collided with a separate parallel universe. And in the parallel universe, all these things did happen, but now we've collided, they no longer did. And so that's why some people remember, some people don't. I think it's super fascinating.
I feel that probably next time you should do a presentation about that, Ric.
Hell yeah.
And we might have many registrants. Yeah. Anyway, next guest today, we have Garrett. How are you, Garrett?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm good. So tell us what's your favorite SEO myth and your favorite conspiracy theory.
Yeah, I think SEO myth is that SEO takes time. Obviously, if you're starting from zero, it takes time. But for large established brands, SEO can actually be a lot quicker than advertising and other things, especially those with established content. So I think that's a really interesting myth that almost every person you talk to in sales does. I know this takes a long time, which I think our industry was like, yeah, sure, give us time, we'll take it. So I don't know if we want to get rid of that myth, a lot of SEOs, but I think that's definitely a myth. And then I think my favorite conspiracy is we didn't go to the moon. I don't know how that started or where it is, and there's probably some people on here like, yeah, we didn't. But I believe that we went to the moon. So there's my favorite conspiracy.
Good. And I have introduced everyone but myself. So that's my sense of importance in the world. I'm Victoria Olsina, I'm the head of SEO of the journal, and I'm going to be hosting this webinar, as you have probably guessed. Now, I'm going to ask myself what my favorite SEO myth and what my favorite conspiracy theory is. Good. So my favorite SEO myth is we have to build a lot of links. We have to have 1 million backlinks. Especially backlinks in general, backlinks without taking into consideration the quality of the backlinks. So no, we don't have to do that. We have to build links from reputable websites and not 1 million. Well, if you have 1 million, it's better, but with a bunch of links from reputable sources, I think we can achieve our SEO goals. And my favorite conspiracy theory, I like the fact that 5G apparently brings coronavirus. That's great.
Super relevant.
Yeah.
Timely.
Super relevant at the moment. So now, showtime. Ric Rodriguez has prepared a presentation about SEO myth, I guess, because that's our topic today.
We're going to find out.
Yeah, we're going to find out what he did. And we will have a panel discussion later and then some questions from the audience. So take over.
All right. I'm going to try and figure out this screen sharing thing. I feel like you have to say that now we're on a call. So we'll do that. All right. So thank you, everyone, for joining. I'm going to talk to you guys through a couple of myths and a few ideas that kind of gives you the science and detail behind why some of the things we think are the case in SEO might not be, and how we can evolve our thinking. I'm going to try and talk for 20 minutes. I'm going to go fast. So the slides will be shared after. If you don't get all the stats, all that kind of thing, don't worry. The slides will be made available so you guys can have that. So there are 4 myths that we're going to talk about today. Links don't matter. SEO is about keywords. Ranking #1 is the best way to win, and SEO isn't measurable. In this presentation, I'm going to focus on 2 because I think you could do a presentation on each of these. But to make sure you guys get the value, I'm going to deep dive onto 2 of these that I think are kind of interlinked. So first thing, let's do some scene setting. We're living in this age of curiosity. As consumers, as people, we are compelled to ask more, right? We want to find out more information than we ever have done before. And what this means is that actually what we think of as search marketers in terms of the typical diagram of like what are keywords and how do we define them and what does it actually mean is skewed. We talk a lot about the long tail and how the long tail is better, but actually no one really kind of discusses why that's the case and what we really mean by the long tail. So I'm going to cover that a little bit right now and maybe give us a 2.0 of what this graph should look like. So we're all kind of comfortable with this. You've got the head terms, they're the high value, high competition terms, the mid tail, they're kind of in the middle. And the long tail are the stuff that is really, really long, perhaps in the number of words or the number of competition and the search volume or the volume they create and drive to the site. The challenge with this is that 15% of search that happens every day, Google status is totally brand new, has never been seen before. So when we define the long tail, actually 15% of what we call the long tail is totally new to search engines every day. There's then a stat that says that 70% of searches, of all searches, are considered long tail, and actually that pushes this graph slightly further up. And that's from, I believe it's from Conductor, and long tail is typically defined as 3 words or more in this study, right? The bit where it gets really interesting in my mind is actually what happens in the middle, because now you get direct answers in search. You can then follow into people also ask, and that kind of goes on ad infinitum. To me, what that means is that people are starting their searches with very broad things, but that middle bit, that bit that's sort of the easy win or easier win than the kind of super high traffic terms, and where customers are a little bit more sort of sure of what they're after at that point, that's really hard to go after. And actually, more often than not, that's now happening away from your site directly in Google, as opposed to on your site and users coming to you. So what that means is really that this graph looks a bit more like the Nike swoosh, where the head terms represent a high amount of volume in terms of total volume, but not that sort of amount of not as much of the spectrum. The mid tail are actually more sort of lower volume in terms of lower traffic to our site than we think. And the long tail is this massive, great big area that really we can define as things that people want to know however they want to know it and however they ask it. So if we think about this in the context of the myth around rankings and whether we should be thinking about rankings and are keywords the way to get to number one, to start with, like, that should change our opinion on what we mean by a keyword. Like, when we say a keyword that is valuable, like, is that one that is super specific and easy to win and likely to convert, or is that one that drives lots of traffic that we have to work really hard for? And actually, is that even the right way to think about it? Here's why I don't think it is. Because search happens, and again, Google referenced this exact wording. Search happens in a moment of space and time. People can ask a very long query like this, and Google isn't going to a website and trying to find a page that has all of these words on it. They're breaking it down into the things they know. So best place they know is 4-star. Open tonight means, I don't know, maybe it's Friday and that you're looking for that day. And then they're going and figuring out whether you align to that, whether what they know about you has information on that, even if it's not on the page itself. But in reality, people are searching for pizza near me in this case. Like, that very long tail query might be exactly what they're looking for and what they really want, but they're just typing these 3 words in. And Google is inferring it from that person, the search history, demographic data, inferred intent, but also from circumstantial data like their IP or partner data or other devices they've got. So you can search, so people can search these 3 words, pizza near me, and Google can still see a long tail query from it, even if they haven't asked for it. And what this ultimately means is that perhaps rankings, and I'm sure we'll discuss this as a panel, may not be the way to, like, specific sort of high value terms may not be the way to number one or to getting the traffic. What it means is that we've got lots of people asking lots of things in lots of different ways. And hey, it's becoming hard to connect with them. Like, connecting with users at the point of intent when they need us the most is a challenge. Someone can ask, how far is the moon? And this is, by the way, is even more interesting. Like, because we're kind of assuming we're talking about Google here, but actually people can go and find this information in loads of different places, from the direct search results, the blue links from websites themselves, voice search, apps, PWAs, all the way through to augmented reality experiences and VR experiences. So actually trying to connect with these people through high value terms in a single place, in a single moment of space and time is complex. So what do we do? Well, we know firstly that it's not just these systems aren't just matching words to words anymore. There's a process of machine learning that goes on to really truly understand what the person wants from what they write and what they know about users that look like that. And then also the ordering of the results is machine learning driven. The ranking part itself is machine learning driven. But what we also know is that underneath all of these systems, there's a knowledge base. There's a place where all of the information that you put and pass to search engines is stored and used intelligently. And it's that bit that we can affect change in. Now, for some people, this is a totally crazy idea that rankings don't matter, that, you know, that keywords are not necessarily the right thing, or targeting specific words is not necessarily the right thing. But to me, this is actually quite an old school idea. It's just that it really focuses on what information retrieval is all about. And that's not something we as search marketers know that much about on the whole. So let's break it down. To do this, we need to think about, well, when we talk about ranking, when we talk about searching, when we talk about all these things, what actually are we even talking about? Well, we start with Google's mission to organize the world's information and make it accessible. It all starts with crawling. Crawling is the system going out and finding information. Crawling leads to parsing. Parsing is not something we talk a lot about within the worlds of search, but it's an absolutely critical step. It's the understanding the thing that we've just gone out and find. It's the reading the content or pulling the data out of it into a way that's meaningful. We then have the indexing component. Indexing part is taking that data that we then learn about and storing it in a way that we can do things with, whether that's recording documents or putting it into data structures, this knowledge graph that we'll talk about, so that we can connect people to the right information rather than documents to documents. Querying, that's the next bit. That's the bit where we go and get the information we need and find out what the right result set is. And finally, the bit we all like to talk about, is the serving, which is the bit where we give the results back to the user in a way that's meaningful. Now, ranking sits within this, but this is not only part of it. And what's really interesting is, as search marketers, we typically focus on the 2 bookends. We focus on crawling and indexing, well, crawling, being found, making our information accessible. And then we focus on the output of all of this, the ranking part, the serving part. But it's actually the bit that we objectively know the least about. right? We don't know that much about ranking because it's a machine learning system that is always sort of processing information. And as a result, and Google doesn't make it public. Conversely, the parsing bit, the indexing bit, and the querying and how search engines understand what we talk about and make that meaningful, tons of information out there. Loads of information out there. It's not necessarily accessible, as in you're going to have to go read research documents and patents, but it's out there. And really what this means for us is to succeed, we need to challenge everything we believe is true. Firstly, this comes down to understanding rankings a bit better. So what do we mean by rankings? Well, I mean, if you speak to most SEOs, you'll say its website goes in, and then based on a set of criteria around, let's call it technical content and links, you get an ordering of results that comes out of it. Well, we don't actually know that's the case. What we know is that there is some stuff that goes in that gets judged in a certain way, and there are certain things we're told are important and not important, and that as a result of those things, a load of stuff comes out of it. So actually, this idea that it's a black box of ranking factors, and by the way, when I say black box, I really mean that there's a lot of smart people in our industry making very, very specific and awesome educated guesses that's very, very important, but we don't get like an official list from Google, which is page speed equals 10% of our estimation. We don't have that. But actually, that's kind of one part of this. On top of this, you get personalization, you get contextual data that's then layered on top of the results, and further secondary refinements to remove bias to show certain things. When you search for corona, now you get coronavirus information rather than corona beer. If it was just left to ranking alone, that would be a more even playing field. But clearly there is an intent and an onus on Google to provide certain information, and that changes the results again. So even if you rank number one on the criteria of the ranking factors, personalization and secondary refinements can still change the ordering of the output. And this is a machine learning system. It feeds itself into itself. So every time a user sees the results and interacts with it or does certain things in certain ways, the system learns. Now, that doesn't mean if you're in position 2, if users click on you, you're going to be in position 1. But it does mean that if Google wants to figure out, should I show a local pack or should I show a direct answer? And what does that mean and how does that change things? That can be seen as important. And there's documents and patterns that talk about how they use this and how they do this. And of course, this happens all the time for everything ad infinitum. The challenge is we just spent like 5 minutes talking about rankings. We haven't even, and that's the ordering of the output, but it doesn't tell us what goes into the system, and what goes into the system is more important. Right? There's no point focusing on kind of the output, the final stage, if you're not even considered in the first place. And being considered is the bit that matters, particularly as we get to these longer tail queries. So let's take a step back. Being considered means that search engines have to know what you do. And one of the biggest advancements in the last, I would say, 2 years, 3 years of search, that I would say is as big as the introduction of PageRank, is Google's introduction of really advanced machine learning or natural language processing technology. These search engines now understand what we say, and not just what we're saying in the words themselves, but the meaning behind it. Take the sentence: hammers Boxing Day for sale online. Now, you might think we're looking for a DIY tool, a hammer, on Boxing Day, which, if you don't know, is the day after Christmas in the UK. It's typically a public holiday, and there's a lot of discounting events. And sale online, you might think, well, we're looking for a transaction event, like a discounting event. Well, this machine thinks the same way, because it's looking typically from left to right and going, I know what a hammer is, and I know what Boxing Day might be in the context of a hammer, and I know what sale might be, and I know what online might mean. And because the word for, if, but, to, the comes up in loads and loads of pieces of text, I'm going to kind of ignore that because I don't want to waste the processing power. The problem with this is we've totally misunderstood this sentence. Totally misunderstood it, because there's a difference between matching words to words and matching words to meaning, and it's the meaning bit that gets missed. So why have we done that? Well, because we totally misunderstood the meaning of the word hammers in this context, because the word for wasn't taken into account. Adding the word for changes the whole context of the sentence. In comes BERT. I mean, we're probably all a bit sick of hearing the acronym BERT, but it fundamentally changed this for the better. So the problem with natural language, in fact, any machine learning system, is that you need examples to train the machine, right? You need to give it 1,000 examples of correct data so it can predict what the answer is. But with language, it's really tough, because we've got like so many different ways that we can say the same thing, and actually coming up with enough examples of those is a real challenge. So in simplistic terms, and BERT does a lot of things, but what BERT really does is it takes existing documents that are already out there, like the whole of Wikipedia, and it plays guess the missing word, or it plays guess the next sentence in a sequence. Because that way you've got, you know what the answer is, yes or no, did I get it right? But you don't have to have tons and tons of specific examples for it to learn from. And then this gets applied to other secondary systems and other refined systems to do lots of cool stuff. In essence, what it gives this machine the ability to do is to go, well, I know hammers has a certain meaning when I see the word boxing next to it, but I also know that when I see hammers and four and day together, this equals this. It's a much more intelligent machine that in this case can understand that we actually don't mention the subject of the sentence, which is the word tickets. And we're looking for West Ham United football tickets for when they play their fixture on Boxing Day for sale online. I'm going to buy them online and say, as opposed to going to the stadium or the stands. Now, if you think about it, if you return that answer to a user that is looking for like DIY tools, you're wrong. And if you return DIY tools to this user, you're wrong too. So this is a really important next step. A bit of an update on this. Like, we're all talking about BERT still in sort of 2020. Lex Fridman, researcher at MIT, predicted what his hope for 2020 was around neural natural language. And he talks about extending the context window by the end of 2020 from tens of words to thousands of words. So the amount of sort of text it can read before to understand what we're talking about in the future. BERT took us from tens to hundreds, just for context. This video came out on the 10th of January. By the 16th of January, Google had already taken us from tens to hundreds to millions on like a fragment of the amount of memory needed. So yes, BERT's amazing, but there are so many much more advanced kind of cooler things that are coming in the pipeline that are going to do what BERT does, but even better. And actually what this means is if we're giving people better understood information, they start to trust it. So why do we care? We care about keywords, right? Well, because people actually care about what they see in search. This is a study from Yext that said that the majority of people that were surveyed, and there's about 6,000 people across Europe, trust the search result on the whole. So when someone Googles how many calories are in a Guinness and Google gives them an answer, even if that answer is wrong, they still believe it because they believe Google. Path Interactive kind of did another study which showed in the younger generations, this number is even higher. In fact, there's a 29% difference in the amount of data information that people that are in the younger generation believe versus the older generation. And that's really kind of meaningful. Why is that meaningful? Because we're about to go through the largest transfer of wealth that's ever happened in the world ever. The younger generation are about to be given the most amount of money that any generation has ever passed down. So if you don't care about this and you fixate on keywords and you fixate on just ranking for one term, you're missing out on a whole world of opportunity, which is not only important to your business from a defensive standpoint, like making sure that you get the right information to people, but actually it's where your customers are looking and what they're trusting and believing and moving on to do. We think all the way back to the mid-tail, this is the bit where you get to influence them and drive them to act on your business and not your competitors. So it really comes down to building what the systems know about you, right? To me, this is the key to winning, making sure that the data layer, the bit that they can reference. So before we even get to ranking, knowing that you're the right person to be returned anyway is important. Maybe we've heard about entities. Now, I don't want to go too much into this. I know I'm pushing 20 minutes here, but I don't want to go sort of too deep into this because it gets really, really complicated. But at the heart of Google is a thing called the knowledge graph. The knowledge graph database is what sits at a lot of these systems. The graph database is made up of entities. Entities are just things that we can describe in a way, by using other things, right? So in this case, West Ham United is an entity. It's a football team, and we can describe West Ham United based on the fact that it's in a division, that it has a nickname, that the team's based in London, and that it plays different fixtures. But by the way, each of these sub-attributes can also be things as well, which is great. So when you ask a question like, who did West Ham play on Boxing Day? It's not going to a place and finding documents that match it. It's not just matching keywords to words. It's going, right, West Ham is a team, Boxing Day is a date, last year is an event. I'm going to reference my brain and go, I need the thing that did the thing on the thing. And that's why we get to this number here. That's why I get this output here. That's the sort of the pathway that's going on. That gets kind of bigger because if you ask a question like, what type of aircraft fly out of London? Like, that would be a really weird thing to store directly under London as a thing. But you can get there by connecting other things together. You can go, London operates a number of airports, Gatwick and Heathrow, and they have airlines, and the airlines run these aircraft. And really what we're doing is saying on a scale of London to Airbus 321, like, how do we get from one side of the graph to the other, and what are the steps between it? This goes on across the whole world. and of course, everything and anything. And this is what we get to. Like a knowledge graph, a graph database is just a network. It's just a load of connected ideas that are put together. And your brand is one of these points on the graph, and everything you do are all the different connections that you connect to. So if you want to be returned for longer tail queries, if you want to convince Google that you are the right source of information, the best source of information, and you want to start to be found more often, like focusing on keywords is one way of doing it. And being number one is one way of doing it. But what we're going to see more and more often, and we're already seeing, is that actually the way to do it is to focus on making sure that Google knows everything it possibly can about you, whether that's through your content, whether that's through structured data, whether that's through your footprint, like the sites that are referencing you. It's not just about the links, it's about the context of the links and what those links do for you in terms of if you're in an article that has great data about what you do, like it tells Google something it didn't know, it's about connecting that back to what it knows about you. My final point, why should we care? Well, because there's tons of gaps right now. This is an open playing field for anyone that wants to do this and wants to take this seriously and do this differently. This is data from Inlinks. It takes a load of documents, loads of pieces of text, and tries to guess what the text is about. It uses Google's Google's knowledge graph API to do that. And what it found was that for this whole set of documents, in the highest area, which was law, it could only recognize the concept or the thing being described 40% of the time. That's because it doesn't know. That's not because it's stupid. That's because there's missing information. Now imagine you're a legal firm and you want to have ideas for how do we create content and what do we start to target? Very, very suddenly you go, well, what's the 60%? And if it's not got reliable information, that means that your competitors probably aren't giving it that information either. It's a level playing field for you, even if you're a small brand in this case. And actually what we found was that there's an average of 23% across all of these different industries. That's 23 out of possible 100. That means there is 77% of the world, and maths is not my strong point, but I think that's right, that Google doesn't know about, and we can provide information around that. And this is the knowledge void, right? This is the bit we need to care about. This is the bit that we really need to, this is the area where if you want to grow your brand in 2020 and do SEO really well, this is the opportunity. And look, I appreciate everyone's time for listening. I hope this has been really insightful and interesting for you guys. I'm really excited to talk to the rest of the panel about some of this stuff and to think about it. But I just want to reiterate a final point. Like the stuff I describe here might sound complicated. It might sound future facing and far away from what you're talking about. But this isn't an idea for you to think about in a year's time. This is already here today. This is already something that's important. And frankly, the future of the web itself kind of depends on what we do in the next couple of months. If we want people to continue to trust Google and get the best possible information, it's not just on Google to do that. It's on us too. All right, that's the presentation. I hope everyone found that interesting.
Thank you very much. That was really good. A lot of information to unpack there. Actually, I have seen this presentation before, and but I found new things and things that definitely I didn't know, or maybe I didn't pay enough attention last time. So we have a panel discussion. I don't know if you have noticed, but while Ric was presenting, my internet went down. I have to turn on the lights. I tried to come into the room 5 times. It all went smoothly, and that's why I'm mentioning this. So we have some questions from the audience that I thought we could address because it's related to BERT.
All right. With Victoria going in and out, maybe I can help. So, Ric, I think there's good questions around BERT. Can you maybe walk through for everyone who's maybe at a high level, what BERT is for everyone?
Yeah, 100%. So BERT is a natural language pre-training technique, right? And break that down. So natural language processing is the ability to understand stuff from words. So seeing a sentence and knowing what the sentence is rather than just going, there's a group of stuff together like numbers and letters put together. So that's kind of the natural language processing bit. The pre-training bit is to do this properly and for the systems to understand what all these words are, we need to train it. It's a machine learning system. So we need to give it some ideas. And it's a way of getting your natural language processing systems up to scratch so it can do more specific things better. And it's part of what Google used to understand queries and learn from documents.
So if we're like sitting here practically, right, and we want to say, okay, I love what you're saying. I believe there's a ton of gaps of information in the market. I want to go away from those competitive big queries that everybody's got a billion articles on and do something new. Is there a way to optimize towards BERT for everyone listening?
So BERT is sort of a thing that happens in the background. You don't optimize towards BERT because that assumes that BERT is a ranking factor. BERT isn't a ranking factor. It's just a process that goes on that means that Google understands what people are asking for and can give them the right and best possible answer. So like, if we're going to say how you optimize for BERT, really what we're saying is, how do you optimize for a user that wants to know a very specific thing in a way that's meaningful for them? And that's just through writing great content and through making your data accessible, like having structured data and all that kind of thing.
No, I love that. And Victoria, I was just stepping in as the Wi-Fi was going out. I think for everyone listening, one of the things you can do then to get really practical around that, right? That I've seen a lot of really successful organizations do is there's tools like Chorus or Gong, right? One of the things that's hardest about being in SEO and being in marketing is we don't know what our customers are communicating with the front lines. What are they saying to the SDR team? What are they saying to the AE? And so we become over-reliant on our keyword research instead of audience research, right? Because I think what you're trying to communicate is a lot of the gaps in information doesn't show up in a keyword research tool because it hasn't ever been searched, right? And so a lot of these gaps exist in understanding what our customers are communicating. Some of the ways I've seen a lot of enterprise organizations do this really well is through Gong, customer support, recordings, Chorus, things like that. But yeah, I love that. Victoria, did you have anything for us?
Well, I'm back. You have my presence now.
Welcome back.
In spite of all of the roadblocks that Virgin Media is putting in my way, I also like tool called SparkToro that beyond the keywords just give you a lot of audience insights, what people are looking for in a particular topic across different channels. So beyond, I mean, going beyond keyword research into audience research and what people are looking for in places that are not Google. So another question from the audience that I like this one because we always talk about SEO in English, but Katja, I don't know how to pronounce this properly, ask us how good is BERT understanding languages other than English. Does anybody know about this?
Yeah, it's a great topic. Some languages are harder. I think that's the fair point. I don't mean this in terms of harder because, but like just naturally harder, have more things going on, more parts of speech, more ways of interpreting things. Really, BERT is as good at understanding languages as the data set for BERT to run on is good, right? I would say it's pretty good in a lot of cases, but Google did stagger the release of BERT in a load of languages for that very reason. I can't remember the total number of languages it's currently available in, but I think it's the majority of kind of most commonly spoken languages, certainly in a lot of European languages right now. But English is a very simple language when compared to others, as in we use the word the. We don't define whether it's a masculine or a feminine word or anything sort of around that. So recognizing patterns is easier for the machine. So yeah, I think that's sort of the takeaway.
So essentially there, Rick, what you're saying is it's less about the language, right? And it's more about like if you go and you're looking at it in Swahili, it's not that BERT can't figure out Swahili. It's is there enough public information around Swahili?
Exactly.
In other words, so it's more tied to the GDP of a spoken language and like information publicly available than it is its ability to decipher or decode, right?
Yeah, I mean that's a strength of it. I mean, it's a machine learning system at its heart. It's as good as the data it runs on. Yeah.
So if you have a language that is more spoken by spoken by many people, you will have a bigger database than a language that is spoken by maybe only one country. Like for example, English versus Italian, I would say.
Yeah, right. Although I'm pretty sure that BERT is getting very good at kind of, as I say, the most commonly spoken languages. So Spanish, English, French, all the sort of popular European ones, and then sort of other languages too, Japanese, Chinese, etc.
That's good. So another question from the audience. How do we identify the 60% that is unknown? That's a really good one.
So I'll happily jump in on this one.
I think you should know.
Yeah. You should. I was going to say, James, your turn.
I know it's
Yeah.
when you start talking about BERT, it's one of these really interesting topics, and it's just nice to kind of lean back and go, oh yeah, that is a good point, and just absorb it all in. But I might take a slightly more controversial approach on that aspect and say, tie it back into the 4 SEO myths, especially around keywords. You are correct in terms of the audience research and getting that additional information. But the keyword is always going to be at the root of that search. Yes, there's a lot of surrounding information, going back to that kind of long, medium, short tail. But yeah, we can start to explore that keyword and surrounding modifiers and experiments. Obviously, we're not going to pick up on that 60%, through certain tools. Semrush is doing a fantastic job of picking more of that up. Go Semrush. But yeah, this information is there, and we can see people also ask. We can see some queries that are bringing people through to the site if you've got Search Console set up, and this is when producing content, you need to factor in a whole range of just kind of broad keywords and related terms and target that. It's Rick kind of alluded to this in his presentation, that it's just a case of kind of understanding the intent behind keywords and creating content clusters around them. So going back to pizza, it's always a fantastic example. I think I've used it for every single pitch, so it appeals to me on a personal level. But you can take kind of that best pizza near me, break that into several different parts, or look at pizza recipe and understanding there might be related to queries such as what is the best pizza recipe, or perfect pizza recipe for pepperoni pizza. Try saying that 10 times fast. And that does start with the traditional keyword research, and that information is really important. It's just kind of part striking gold, getting lucky, and picking up that 60%. But I think there's that statistic as well that there's a few new billion searches every day. I can't remember. It's something like 15% of Google searches every day are brand new. So it's worth pursuing that 60%, but maybe taking like one step back and focusing on the signals that we can see and just building information around those. And a content SEO strategy should be an ongoing thing to kind of pick those things up.
Yeah, also there are keywords that are very new that show apparently no keyword volume. I remember at my previous job that we were working with enterprise blockchain products, and according to Google, there was no demand on it. And well, definitely there is. And we built some successful pages and then copy the model for those keywords that Google was saying that there was no demand. Like, for example, quite very specific terms like blockchain for central banking or blockchain for supply chain. So we just took a model, saw what was ranking on the SERP, and built from there without any keyword research. But those were the products that we were selling. And beyond that, even if there was no demand back then because it was a new thing, it could be implied that there would be demand as long as time goes by, because it's a very sort of pioneering technology.
Yeah, I think.
No, I interrupted you because internet is the nature of webinars that you don't know when somebody else will speak. Please go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say it'd be fascinating to take a look at the NHS website and the analytics and back-end data there and see compare day-to-day searches around COVID. I'd imagine in the last week alone, people are now searching things like medium, high risk COVID, whereas last week those terms might not have existed at all.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, I think there's a couple of points on that, right? There's the idea of query shift, which is the meaning of words changing over time, and that actually a word and a set of results isn't a defined set; it's a transient thing. Take the example of BlackBerry and Apple, right? And Apple is a thing that you eat, but actually over time, most people searching for Apple probably looking for an iPhone right now. And there's that idea that, firstly, to your point, not only is it new queries with zero search volume, but actually old queries take on new meaning. But then to the point that Victoria made, like 0%, zero search terms, you can have 5 searches a month, which is still 60 searches a year for a query, and that still be registered as 0. So I wouldn't be so sure on the data for that one.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that I think about, because I think I sit in a slightly different role than Rick and James, because they get to be in this like pushing the buttons and being in the campaign's perspective, and I get the like communicating it to an executive team only perspective. And what I found is a little the nuance here is when we put SEO on a pedestal, we fail. And what I've seen in the sense when keyword research drives content strategy, it's a mistake because none of us get paid to drive traffic. And so I have a slightly different approach to how I think about solving problems with SEO, I guess. And to me, keyword research and all the nuance of what Rick talked about, I think is really illuminating. But to then take that into practical application, I think what we have to say is when I look at my business or when I look at my client's business, where do I have the best gross margin, right? Like where do I have the best actual profitability amongst, let's say I have 4 product lines. What product's most profitable for my business? Cool. When I sell that product, what are the questions people struggle with or the gaps they have around understanding how that product changes the pain they came to me with, the value they're looking to create? And now I'm thinking of a content strategy that also is functioning as sales enablement, that's also functioning as brand awareness, and it's fitting back into how I make my money. And then from that, I put that into a keyword research tool. And then I ask, cool, when I'm going to do a scoring model, so then I export my keyword research out of Semrush, whatever tool I'm using, and I create a scoring model and I say, cool, am I going to weight keyword volume at a higher level than sales enablement? And we can actually start to figure out what's driving revenue the most for the business. And when you look at it that way, it gets really important. And then when we get to the final spot, which is even if I ranked for this query, is my piece of content so good that people are more likely to buy from me after they read it than before? Because what I found is SEO is bastardized brand. In other words, great brands are losing the value of their brand in the pursuit of more traffic because how they pursue traffic directly conflicts with quality at scale. And so when we start to look at it all through that lens and we put our solutions through that perspective, that's, in my opinion, keyword research comes to life, audience research comes to life, leveraging BERT comes to life. And now we become highly strategic SEOs that have a deep technical understanding of our environment. And that's when we drive value.
And I think that's a very important point, because actually understanding what your customers are looking for and serving to those needs, well, like your customers are asking Google the same questions. It just, they haven't got to you yet. And in fact, they're asking it about similar brands and you might have an answer for them that is helpful. Like understanding what the people around you are saying. And you learn that from your sales enablement teams, from your customer service teams, like who have the voice of the customer and their interest. Like that's how you start to plan out your kind of direct content strategy. And then you go on. And to James's point earlier, like it's an ongoing thing. It's not just a quick, we need to go and make 100 pieces. Like, no, it's an ongoing thing where you need to keep that cadence.
Exactly. Now, I have a question now that is related to one of my urban legends. Actually, not to urban legends, to the conspiracy theory. One of our users says, how do you have any insights to share about how user behavior changed due to COVID and how has this affected SEO?
Yeah.
It's 5G. I want to
No, I think there's some really special data, especially in the UK. So Optimizer is a PPC tool, and they actually layer in. So they'll take your export of your Google Ads API, and then you can layer in public policy changes by date, and then see how it affected your CPM, CPC, cost per conversion, cost per click. It's really, really cool. So you can do it in any country. So they've actually integrated all the major policy changes of all major advertising countries. And so I can look at, let's say one of our clients is spending $500,000 a month in a certain industry or whatever that is. And I can start to see how public policy shifts and dates of announcements are changing. So yeah, there is some data out there like that, but it's a cool perspective of where you can layer your public policy with your GA data and then chart to see if there's anomalies.
Going from like looking at, going back to a keyword level, we can definitely see across a lot of our clients that trust is becoming a big thing as a modifier. The longer COVID's gone on, the more we're seeing is blankety blank trustworthy, blankety blank reviews. And that's, something that needs to be addressed quite early on before it could be something that, you'd rely on Trustpilot for, or, your Google local ads. But now there needs to be content demonstrating this brand is trustworthy, this brand is believable, this isn't the Tory party of whatever industry we work in. This is something you can put your faith in.
Yeah, definitely. What we are seeing is a lot of, in this area, in this age of fake news, a lot of the blog, the content that we get backlinks for is stats on anything. Stats on the amount of people that are starting their own business, stats about the people that get rejected for loans. Everything that is apparently database, we are getting huge traction for that. And I feel is, because as everything is fake, a number will be true or something on those lines. So I think that's working really well in fintech right now. And we got links from really reputable websites like TalkTalk, BT, The Next Web, Tide, really good, huge, highly authoritative websites or building stats. Articles around stats.
Yeah. On the topic of links, because Rick, put you in the hot seat for a moment. That's something that you glossed over. And we've spoken in the past about links, so it's certainly just set you up for what do you think of links in 2020 as an SEO tactic?
God, thanks, mate.
That's all right. Happy to help.
Yeah, I glossed over because we could talk all day about this. All right, so links in 2020. Take the idea of a network, right? The web is connected together as a network. You've got points, documents that get connected to other documents with things called links. And back in the day, that was a really cool thing. It was totally new. Google was like, I'm going to use the connections between documents to tell me whether this is a good place to get information, yes or no. The thing is, that was 20 years ago. And we're now at the point where there are super sophisticated systems that go, actually, I don't just care the fact that you've been connected to from this place to there. I know that there's content on that page. I know that that page has intrinsic value for lots and lots of other reasons. So what are links in 2020? I think there's kind of two components. First point is, I don't call them links in my organization. I call them footprint. I call it about building a footprint, because actually being perceived as a business with all of the reputable hallmarks or hallmark of a reputable business is as important as just having an A to B connection from one site to another. So really, you can look at it as, if I'm a brand and I'm an established brand, I'm going to have links, right? If I'm a FTSE 250, I'm going to be known for stuff. And that carries weight. If I'm a small business, I need to get known for stuff. And one way I might do that is to reach out to publications where my audience are and say, hey, do you want to talk about some of the stuff I'm doing? Like, that's PR. And if as a result, people go from there to your website and you can build those connections, that's a really positive thing. So if we look at things as links circa 2004, even circa 2010, that's not in line with the current standpoint of there's lots of machine learning systems that are judging stuff. But the principle of getting a connection from A to B from a place where your audience are, that's still helpful in my mind. So yeah, kind of an on the fence, do they matter, don't they matter kind of answer, but it's all about the footprint that you create and the signals that passes on to the search engine.
Yeah, I think,
totally agree.
Right, James, I think, and Rick, I think the mind shift of the whole industry is we used to pursue links regardless of their quality, their readership, or anything because of an other objective we were trying to accomplish. We want this piece of content to rank for this keyword, and we don't care what that takes. The idea is any link from .gov, .edu, right? All these things that really had no connection could drive it. But if once again we put SEO on the foot rug and we put our business on the pedestal, the real question is what do we want to be known for and who do we want to be known by? And then the real answer is, how do we position our brand to be discoverable when there's purchase intent? And that becomes the point of SEO, right? Because if you start to look at the way SEO works, is purchase intent has completely changed. If someone takes your query, right, like ERP software, and modifies it by top, best, or reviews, I can guarantee you there's not one individual website ranking on that, despite having solution pages for ERP software. It's all third-party review sites. This is what I call the Yelp and the Amazon effect. And so the more we think about SEO in the sense of how I own my content and how I do things and me, the worse it is. When we put brand on a pedestal and say, how do I make my money? Where do I want my brand to be perceived? Who do I want to know about my brand? And everything goes about our brands. Organic's just a medium that drives the brand discoverability when there's purchase intent. As long as we accomplish that, we can have increasing marginal returns. In other words, increasing traffic increases revenue. If we don't do that, we have diminishing marginal returns where increasing traffic doesn't increase revenue. And then any sharp CMO in the world is going to slash your budgets. And so the key here is really understanding how a business makes its money, how to make a brand discoverable. And then we have all these different levers and tools we can pull, whether that's digital PR, whether that's content marketing, whether that's technical. Like, we should be doing technical because it's a better user experience, not because it increases user rankings, right? Like, if we put everything back into brand, now our game works, and you can start charging $30,000 a month for SEO, $50,000 a month for SEO, and you can make $250,000 as an SEO consultant easy. And this whole game changes on what your value is when you put it in a different lens. And I think that's what I want the whole industry to do, because I think our industry is constantly devalued because of how we approach what we do and why it matters. And if we change that, I think that's the true growth for all of us.
Yeah, amen to that. James, I realize you haven't said too much. What do you think about links? Let me ask you the question back.
See, because I want to talk about links, but I also want to talk about what Garrett was just saying, that I think kind of shifting that lens. I'll start with that lens. I think that is a good idea at a certain scale or a certain level. If you're A-list blue chip client, that is one conversation to have, and you have to focus on many different things: the audience experience, what your pre-established audience is searching for related to your brand. If we're talking, the startups, the small to medium enterprises, SEO in the more traditional sense is key, and be it keyword research, making sure, you're using these certain keywords for certain pages, targeting those tabs. That's how you build up your initial audience. Digital PR, 100% agree. The link tactics we were doing 10 years ago, they died a dishonorable death, and they should stay dead. Instead of going to forums, directories, and guest blogging, that's gone. Digital PR is essential. Because one, it builds up these high quality links. That is a ranking factor, despite what Google says, but it's still important for international search engines as well. That, is one level. If you're a big brand, that can open so many doors. We've worked with a client recently that secured links from Fox, from The Guardian, and that's opened doors. People want to keep talking about the brand. Flipping that on its head, and looking at those kind of small businesses, your local startups, there's a plumber in the local area. He still has to build links, whether it's going for a local directory, making sure he's featured on his local Facebook selling page, or even just getting into whatever one of a million checker trade sites. That's still a valid tactic. And I think, all of these SEO myths are quite controversial, because if you look at them in isolation to one particular industry, or one particular level within an industry, some of these are going to be relevant, some of these are going to be completely irrelevant, and I'm trying to avoid saying it depends, because I made myself a promise, and I think, Victoria, you get to kick me off the call now. But yeah, it's all of this works, and it's an important discussion to have, I think. So yeah, I am very much pro links, in the sense of don't do the gamey, spammy link building tactics we were all guilty of 10 years ago, but focus more on the digital PR side of things, building up these great contacts, these great relationships, and great stories promoting your business, your brand, your website. And then if you're, starting out, focusing on getting some of the essentials right as well.
Yeah, I'm not going to kick you out.
Safe.
Sorry, go, Garrett. I was going to say something totally irrelevant. So go for it.
I was going to say, for everyone listening, I think the coolest place for you to start when you're thinking of, hey, I have all these options, right? What do I do? Is through a financial model, right? Like if you can understand how much it costs to acquire a customer and how valuable that customer is. So like what we like to do is I call this LTV CAC modeling, right? So you build out a full model and you have all your channels. So you have organic over here. And even within organic, you can have link building, you can have content, you can have technical. You can start to break things out and you can take the real cost that takes to execute those things, whether it's a Google ads or it's Capterra, G2, Yelp, Facebook ads, whatever that is you're running. And you can start to ask yourself, where do I want to spend my next dollar? Because when you go to that plumber, they could spend a ton of time on organic, but maybe never rank well enough to take market share from Yelp. And it was unwise. Maybe they went for generic queries that weren't localized. So even though they ranked number one, there was only 5% of those queries occurring within a 5-mile radius where 95% of their phone calls come from. And if they drive more than 5 miles, they lose money on gas. And so it's not that SEO is wrong or right, or PPC is wrong or right, or anything's wrong or right. It's really through the lens of how does a business make money and what does its unit economics allow? Right. So if a certain organization has a very large lifetime value, they can get really aggressive on direct response and things that have high initial cost per acquisitions because they have a long lifetime value. Other organizations, like I was talking with Kevin Lee, the VP of Buffer yesterday, they do a phenomenal job of self-onboarding, but they have a very low average revenue per user. So they have to be. In other words, they can't do paid advertising because it would lose them money. So if we take everything back to a financial model, it's no longer about it depends. It depends can be just gone because all that really matters is if your business makes money or not, investing in a channel. And then all channels make money up to a certain point. And then the question is, can I keep investing in this? Right? Like many businesses can only invest so much in Capterra before it hits diminishing marginal returns. Many businesses can only invest so much in Facebook ads before it creates diminishing marginal returns. So if you put everything through the lens of like capital allocation and financial modeling, you don't have to say it depends anymore. It's really easy to say, here's what you should do. And that creates, I think, that confidence. And then that's what creates the funding, right? The relationship between SEO and a CFO. That's the gap we don't have. And that's why many agencies are selling SEO services at $2,500 a month, which makes 0 sense. Yet that's the market rate because they have no relationship with financial modeling and they can't actually say how much value they created. And so to me, the way we solve all of our issues as an industry is get back to financial modeling. And then it's no longer about it depends. It's just this is what you should do, this is what you shouldn't do. And we can start charging exceptionally more and driving more value, whether we're in-house or an agency.
A lot of business don't even know about their own financial modeling, Garrett.
Yeah.
A lot of startups in particular.
Yeah.
Cheap money, the times we have been living since the last economic recession, where all the money has to be put into tech, and sometimes tech startups cannot even answer how do they make money. But it's a very valid point, and within the business that know how to make money, that should be the driver. So we are about to run out of time, guys. So if anybody wants to say some final words, you're welcome to. And I would like to thank Semrush for inviting us and for giving me a t-shirt and a mug. I feel a true influencer now. I also have socks that I will show because why not? This is what I do on webinars. This is my Semrush socks.
Very stylish.
Thank you for that.
Very stylish.
Yeah. So yeah, unless you want to see some final words, we can wrap up. And
Yeah, I think I don't know how well we solved the myths today. We went on a lot of random tangents, which is always good. So it's definitely, I'd love to get back and talk more about it with you guys, and really address some of these points because there's always new myths as well.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Glad to be here. For everyone listening, attribution's hard. It's not impossible. Just keep pushing, right? You can use Google Click ID. You can use HubSpot Marketo, Pardot. You can build your own. You can tie it back to Salesforce, bidirectionally sync. It's totally doable. And keep pursuing. If you have any questions, follow me on Twitter. And love to help on how you all can do better attribution. And then less it depends and more this is exactly what we should do. And that's helpful.
Yeah, and like I agree with everything on that point. Attribution is possible. You just got to keep trying and see what works. I just want to thank Victoria for being a great host. I want to thank Kate and Anton for putting on the production, and to the other co-hosts for being awesome to talk to, and clearly for everyone else for joining. It's been an awesome session.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Kate. Thank you, Anton. And I hope to see you soon.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye.